The air in the abyss was thick with dry ice and the metallic tang of cheap energy drinks. Marco was 18, standing at the edge of the dance floor like a ghost at his own feast. He was a boy made of sharp angles and unvoiced longings. Then, he saw her. She was elevated above the throngs of sweating bodies, dancing on a plexiglass cube. Her name, or at least the name the DJ shouted, was Celine. She moved with a fluid, terrifying grace that made the other dancers look like they were struggling through water. She wore silver leather that caught the strobe lights, but it was her skin that held Marco captive. It was the color of unblemished cream, glowing with an inner luminescence. He spent every weekend there. He never danced. He just watched. Once, she looked down, her amber eyes locking onto his for a fraction of a second. Marco felt his heart hammer against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wanted to speak, to be the kind of man who could command her attention, but he was just a boy. By the time the summer heat faded, the cube was empty. She was gone. 12 years later, Milan was a different city, and Marco was a different man. He was 30, an architect with a penchant for structure and a quiet life. The memory of the neon goddess had become a dusty relic of his youth. Until the rainy Tuesday on Via Monte Napoleon. He saw a woman standing under a black umbrella, waiting for a car. The world stopped. It wasn't just a resemblance, it was her. But as he approached, his mind recoiled. It had been over a decade, yet she hadn't aged a single day. The same jawline, the same haunting amber gaze, the same absence of the tiny lines that time carves into everyone. Celine, he found himself saying, his voice deeper than he remembered. She turned. A slow, knowing smile spread across her lips. The boy from the shadows. You grew up well, Marco. They exchanged numbers. 3 nights later, when she invited him for dinner, he could not believe this was real. When Marco entered Celine's apartment, the atmosphere was thick with a scent that defied the modern Milanese skyline outside, a heady mix of ancient incense, cold rain, and something muskier, more carnal. The apartment was a sanctuary of shadows. Heavy, floor-to-ceiling velvet drapes blocked out the city lights, leaving only the flickering glow of a dozen beeswax candles to illuminate the space. Marco felt the weight of his own mortality as he looked at her. He was 30 now, his shoulders broader, his stubble thick, his hands calloused by work. Celine, however, was a glitch in the matrix of time. You're staring again, Marco, she purred. Her voice was like velvet dragged over gravel. She didn't walk toward him, she glided, stopping so close that he could smell the faint, metallic sweetness of her breath. I'm trying to understand how the world can be so cruel to me and so kind to you, Marco whispered, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Celine reached out, her fingers, chilled like river stones, tracing the line of his jaw. Time is a cage, my love. I simply broke the lock. She grabbed the lapels of his coat and pulled him toward her with a strength that should have been impossible for her slender frame. When their lips met, it wasn't a gentle reunion. It was a collision. Her mouth was a paradox of ice and fire. Marco's hands, driven by years of frustration, found her waist, crushing the silk of her dress against her skin. He backed her against a mahogany table, his hands sliding up to her thighs. The sensation of his warm, rough palms against her unnaturally smooth, cool skin sent a jolt of electricity through him. He felt a desperate need to claim her, to prove that the goddess of his youth was finally made of flesh and blood. Celine let out a low, guttural moan, her head falling back to expose the elegant curve of her throat. Do you still want me, boy? Even if I am a graveyard of secrets? I've wanted you since I was 18, he growled, burying his face in the crook of her neck. I don't care what you are. He felt her body tense, a sudden, predatory rigidity. Her hands moved to his hair, tensing, and then he felt it, the sharp, electric sting of her fangs grazing the sensitive skin behind his ear. It wasn't a bite, not yet, it was a promise. A spicy, dangerous thrill shot straight to his core, a mixture of fear and the most intense arousal he had ever known. Marco ripped his shirt open, buttons skittering across the hardwood floor like hail. He wanted her to see him, the man he had become. He pressed her hand against his chest, right over his racing heart. Feel that, he gasped. That's yours. All of it. Celine's eyes bled from amber to a deep, molten crimson. She didn't hesitate. She climbed onto him, her legs wrapping around his waist, pinning him with superhuman force. She began to kiss a trail down his chest, her tongue tracing the heat of his skin, leaving a wake of shivering goosebumps. When she finally sank her teeth into the meat of his shoulder, the world exploded. It wasn't just pain, it was a sensory overload that blurred the lines between pleasure and agony. He felt his blood rush toward her, a hot, rhythmic pulse that seemed to sync with the throbbing between his legs. His hands gripped her hips, guiding her rhythm as they became a chaotic tangle of limbs and gasps in the flickering candlelight. In that darkness, Marco didn't just discover her secret, he became a part of it. He was the fuel, and she was the eternal flame, and for the first time in his life, the shy boy from the disco was truly, devastatingly alive. The passage of time had been a thief for Marco, but for their love, it had been a master alchemist, turning the raw fire of youth into something deep, resonant, and impossibly tender. The master bedroom of their villa overlooking Lake Como was silent, save for the rhythmic sigh of the wind through the cypress trees and the steady, slightly heavy breathing of a man who had lived a full life. Marco sat on the edge of the bed, the silk sheets rustling under his weight. He caught his reflection in the darkened window pane. His hair was now a distinguished silver, and the skin on his hands was mapped with the fine, translucent lines of 52 years. A pair of arms, impossibly smooth and porcelain white, slid around his waist from behind. Celine pressed her cheek against his back, right between his shoulder blades. "You're thinking about the end again," she whispered. Her voice hadn't aged a day. It was still the same melodic chime that had haunted his dreams in that strobe-lit club 34 years ago. Marco turned in her arms, his joints giving a faint, dry pop that made him smile sadly. He reached up, his weathered hand spotted with the marks of time cupping her face. She looked like a statue of a goddess, frozen at 21, her amber eyes wide and filled with a timeless devotion. "I'm thinking about the miracle of you," Marco replied, his voice raspy but warm. "How you've stayed the same while I've become a different man 10 times over. I'm an old house, Celine. The roof leaks, the floorboards creak. And I love every inch of this house," she interrupted, her voice trembling with a rare, immortal fragility. She took his hand and kissed the palm, her lips lingering on the lifeline etched into his skin. "To the world, you are fading. To me, you are ripening. Your scent has changed, it's deeper now, like old wine and sun-warmed earth. I find it more intoxicating than the boy you were." She pulled him down onto the pillows, her movements slow and deliberate, honoring the body that could no longer move with the frantic energy of youth. There was a profound, sentimental eroticism in their slowness. When she kissed him, she wasn't just seeking his blood, she was seeking his soul. He ran his fingers through her thick, black hair, marveling at how it felt exactly as it did the night they met. He was the one who would leave, eventually. They both knew it. Every grey hair was a countdown, every wrinkle a testament to the brevity of his spark. Yet, as she climbed atop him, her weight light as a shadow, the contrast was breathtaking. Her youthful, firm breasts pressed against his broad, aging chest, the marble and the oak. "I will hold this version of you forever," she murmured, leaning down to nil the space between them. "I have memorized the boy, the man, and now the sage. You are my only anchor in a sea of centuries." She didn't bite him with the hunger of a predator that night. She did it with the reverence of a communicant. As her fangs grazed his neck, Marco felt a tear slide from the corner of his eye, lost in the hairline of his temple. It wasn't a tear of sorrow, but of an overwhelming, spicy ache, the realization that being loved by an immortal was the only way a mortal could ever truly touch the infinite. In the quiet dark, as he felt her cool essence mingling with his fading heat, Marco realized that while his body was bowing to the years, his heart was still that 18-year-old boy on the edge of the dance floor, finally, blissfully, at home.